Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk with Keren Eldad. She is a business coach, speaker, and trusted advisor to industry-leading executives and record-setting entrepreneurs. She's been featured in Oprah Magazine, on the Today Show, Forbes, Harvard Business Review, Bravo, and many more. She helps leaders make a significant breakthrough in their profit growth, but also in their business, but also in revitalizing their energy and defining the meaning of their lives. And so today we're going to talk about the superstar paradox, which I'm really excited about. So Keren, welcome Leaders Transformation.
Thanks, Nicole. It's a real honor to be here. I'm a big fan of the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I am so excited about this because we have just finished off a How to Start a Movement series, which was really fun, had lots of amazing guests, one of which was somebody that you recommended me to, is Eva Yashari. So that's actually had just come out. So for those of you that are listening now, go back and go on the Leaders of Transformation. You can type in Eva and her episode will come up and you can check that out. Good friend of Keren's. But we're also transitioning into a new series on conscious capitalism. Now, in order for you to be a conscious capitalist, you got to take care of yourself, right? And a lot of the conscious capitalism, advocates, they're moving and grooving and making things happen and so forth. And so I thought this was a perfect time to have this conversation so that we can kind of prepare for that, prepare your mind, prepare yourself to be more effective as a leader and an industry leader. So with that in mind, Keren, let's talk about this superstar paradox. What is it and how did you discover it?
Sure. Before that, I just want to say one thing, and that's going to tie into pretty much everything that we say here. I admire enormously any series that's devoted to conscious capitalism, not only because I believe that it's a cool buzzword that should be thrown around, but because I really and truly believe in it. I am a huge capitalism believer, but I am also of an advocate of the fact that there should be checks and balances and measures of consciousness taken in. And what does conscious mean? Conscious means self-aware. Conscious means understanding and embracing of core fundamental values and principles that guide you as you embrace capitalism, because capitalism is still run by humans. It's really not just a system that goes on by itself. And that brings me to the superstar paradox because they are intrinsically linked. The superstar paradox is a phenomenon that I discovered while working with the high-powered, world-class leaders that I have the enormous privilege of coaching, that I saw again and again and again, where their success, their outward success, was not commensurate with their inward bad feeling. They essentially were producing a life of achievement that was translating to a life of dissatisfaction underneath. That is the superstar paradox. It's an incredible paradox because most people who believe that money, status, power will result in happiness are usually rather baffled and what am I doing wrong about the consequence that is not like that. And it doesn't even have to be, I'm not talking here about divorce or depression or panic attacks, even though those are extraordinarily common in the overachiever echelon. What I'm really talking about is that nagging sense of, is that all there is? Is this really how I'm supposed to feel? Shouldn't I feel a little bit better about this? Where's my mojo? Where's my excitement? Where's my passion? Where's my enthusiasm? And that is, in a nutshell, what the superstar paradox is. And I came to it by coaching people again and again and again and realizing that after we got, through the mindset part, which they absorb very readily, they're overachievers, and then the influence and the executive presence and the time management modules, which they absorb readily, they start talking about real stuff.
Yes.
Going on here. And then you really get to work.
I love what you just said there about the mindset piece, because that is also another buzzword. And I always hesitate when I use buzzwords because it's like, people throw out these terms and what do they actually mean? And so they get so focused on the doing part of it that they forget the being part of that, what it actually means to be a conscious capitalist. And you talked about that. And you just mentioned about mindset. There's a lot of talk right now about this idea of, mindset. Yeah. Positive thinking, go and do it, And I remember it was about a year and a half ago when I had a number of tragedies that happened in my life. And there were the overachievers in my community that said, Nicole, you got this. You can power through this. You're strong. Keep at it. Keep going. Keep moving forward. And I'm like, wait a second. I appreciate all of that cheerleading and support. And there's a time for that. And there's also a time to stop and to check in and to see where I'm at and just to be. And so I was like, I need a moment, and I might need a few to work through this so that I can come back and be the most effective leader possible. So talk about that. You said they finally get to the point of what's real. So what is real?
Off of what you just said, Nicole, first thing is, you're absolutely right. There's a presumption, especially amongst overachievers, that life should be linear. And life, as you have aptly named your podcast, is in the transitions. It's absolutely not linear. It shouldn't be linear. No one has ever expected it to be linear. And in fact, if it were linear, it'd be boring. All the glory is in the transitions. Unfortunately, they don't feel good to us, but we do enormously benefit from them. We show who we really are through them. So that's the first part of the quotient. The second flawed premise is, what is a mindset anyway? Most people, you're right, they're throwing out as this willy-nilly attitude of positivity. But there are two flawed premises in there. A mindset can be negative. A mindset is simply a conglomerate of thoughts that you are very, very fixated on. It's your practiced point of focus. Which leads me to, what is positive thinking, or what is positive psychology? It's actually not, you got this. I mean, when people think that that's what I do, that I just get out there, you go get them, you know who you are, that's really not what I do. And it would actually be rather, I think, self-serving. Instead, positive psychology, the school of positive psychology, which today is one of the most dominant tracks in psychology, is the recognition that for 60 years, psychology was usually the look of at pathos and neuroses. And in the 80s and 90s, Dr. Martin Seligman, Dr. Carol Dweck, other very, very forward-thinking organizational psychologists and psychologists started thinking, why don't we study mindfulness, happiness, and resilience, and other hallmarks of well-being in the same way and with the same force as we are studying pathos and neuroses? And that's exactly what positive psychology is. It's not that we're not looking at the same things, it's that we're taking them in a way that's open and rife for new possibilities rather than limiting.
Oh my gosh, I love you. I could I could listen to you all day talk about this. It's like, yes, absolutely. And, and so let's actually just back up just for a moment, because I know we're going to talk more about what this is, how people can overcome this. But I would also love our listeners to get to know you a little bit in terms of, how did you discover this for yourself?
I lived the superstar paradox. I once heard a coach say that the greatest clients you can ever have is a former version of yourself. And that's where all the passion comes from. I love them so much and have such deep empathy, but also such a deep recognition of their power for them, because I was once in those shoes. By the time I was 31, I was making multiple six figures at $1 billion company, which is very successful, technically speaking. And I was married to a tall guy, which, Nicole, as you know, is the ultimate goal in life. City, and I looked really good on Instagram, and I won lots of awards, and I wore really fancy clothes. And I woke up about 2 years into the marriage, really just disliking all the systems in my life. I didn't really love the house. I was living in a city that wasn't of my choice. I'm a New Yorker. For a New Yorker to live in Zurich is automatic death. The marriage was horrible, really an abusive relationship. I'm not just talking about, the regular no sex companionship marriage. This was a miserable marriage where I was constantly berated in front of my friends and humiliated in private. And the job was okay. Really, I was always very good at my job. I was always a very smart go-getter. But I always had this weird feeling that I could do a lot more than this. And I never really pointed my attention at it, because this was how you make money, and stability was what I was wired towards. And I got really lucky, Nicole. I got really lucky. That relationship was so miserable. It had to end in divorce. And with it, collapsed almost all the systems. The fancy clothes had to go into storage, and the storage burned down. So I'm in the middle of what really becomes a biblical meltdown of all of the systems. I don't mind telling you, I was out of work for a really long time. I had to sleep on a friend's couch. And then the worst thing that could possibly happen happened. My 2 cats died within 2 weeks of each other. I don't have children, so that's a really big deal. And it was in that magnificent moment that I realized that maybe I wasn't taking the decisions from the right place. And maybe I could take a step back and really think about my life and ask myself some really big questions like, who are you? What do you actually like? And what do you actually want to do? Because I had nothing left to lose. Nothing left to lose, nothing left to cover up, nothing left to pretend on Instagram.
Yeah.
And from there, I started reaching for the self-help books and started reaching for the coaching programs. And I don't know how to say this other than thank God, because here we are.
You know, you talked about earlier, life is not linear, and it's so true. I'm actually working on a book talking about these valleys to victories, and you actually learn in the valleys way more than you ever learn on a mountaintop. And your story is a perfect example of that. If everything was going well, you wouldn't have bothered to look for the personal development answers in the personal development space. You wouldn't have gone to coaching, and you wouldn't be doing what you're doing here today. So
The crux, though.
what's
The big
that?
obstacle for superstars is it's not broke. Why should I fix it?
Yes.
It's a funny thing because I also mentioned to you that they'll always wedge this in the cracks almost at the end of the program. Usually when people seek coaching, they are Olympic champions who want to get better, richer, faster, more productive. And I'm okay with that. I love helping you. I definitely know what I'm doing. And that's where you can definitely raise your game. But the real game is the mindset game, is the mindset of resilience and passion. And to get there, you really have to dig deep, unfortunately. And it's
Yes.
never pretty.
And you got to break down. It's interesting. Yeah. Because I have the same thing with entrepreneurs. They'll say, you know, I want to grow my business. I want to 10X my business. I want to do all these things. And it's like, okay, so in order to do that, we'll take care of that. But in order to do that, we first have to start here. And they don't want to start here, but this, and they're like, why are we over here talking about mindset and talking about what's happening in my personal life and all of this kind of unnecessary stuff? Why are you wasting time here? Because what's happening over here is happening here, and what's happening here is happening over here. And so I just absolutely love what you're.
Yeah, are always translatable. I'm so sorry. I don't really know how to turn off the little indications on my phone, but I want to tell you that just this morning I was speaking to an entrepreneur in that anxiety that fundraising isn't going my way. And that's exactly it. This is where the work is. You don't think that the doubt is going to affect you because you're riding high for 5 seconds. The doubt is going to affect you. You really have to work on the systematic dissolution of that fear.
So how do you do that?
Well, you work with a coach, quite frankly. And I really mean that because I love watching people leave a Tony Robbins seminar and say, I'm cured and my life has meaning. But really that's not the work. The work is the work, and the work does take work.
That's the awareness. That's the beginning. Yep.
The awareness can be created right now. The awareness is simply like this. You can tell if your life is going the way you really, really want it to go in 2 ways. Number 1 is what's showing up in your life. The systems are fantastic. And that means your wealth is productive, your health is well, and your marriage or relationship, first of all, you are in one, generally speaking. And number 2, you are certainly thriving in that relationship. It's not a business partnership. It's not a roommate situation. And the second way to tell if things are going really, really well is how you feel. You feel happier than you don't feel unhappy. It's very, very simple. And if anybody is honest enough with themselves right now to say, the truth is my expectations are nowhere near where my desire is right now. I feel a lot of anxiety. I'm not satisfied in a couple of areas in my life. I'm not seeing the kinds of things I'd like. That is self-awareness. The understanding that this is the distance that you'd like to go. And from there, we can help you. But without that, no one can help you. My rabbi likes to say, if an old lady doesn't want to cross the street, you don't get to drag her.
That's good. So why is this so prevalent today? Is it, or maybe a different question would be, is it more prevalent than it was maybe 100 years ago? And if so, why?
I don't know, because I wasn't around 100 years ago. There are a couple of things that emerge. I'm a huge Yuval Noah Harari fan and the History of Mankind books fan. And whenever people say these are the worst of times and the biggest times of change, I always say, well, that's really relative. I'm pretty sure the printing press left an enormous dent in human psychology. But we are certainly living in very unusual times, and novelty is novelty. And the rate of change, we do know that the pace of change is far more all-encompassing, globalized, and faster. So in that sense, we are certainly in an anomaly of times. But I'll tell you what it's like from the practitioner's standpoint. 100 years ago, your mindset and your opinion of yourself and your beliefs were generally formed by your parents, your peers, your community, your immediate society. Today, you're taking cues from some foreigners and strangers you've never met before on Instagram. I love foreigners. I didn't mean that in a derogatory way. I am a foreigner, for the record. I meant strangers that you've never met on Instagram, and they are telling you what a good life looks like. And that is creating enormous dissonance for most of us, and especially for young people.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and there's always this you see it, right? You see the selfies, you see the highlight reels, and everybody's comparing their, blooper reel, if you will, to someone else's highlight reel. And well, my life should be like that. And it also creates dissatisfaction even in that. So you might even have and feel like you have a nice, great life. And then you go on Facebook or Instagram and you look and you go, wow, and I hear that a lot. It's like, well, but I should have this, or this is what happiness is. This is what it looks like. And it's like, well, what are you basing your identity, and what are you basing your definition of happiness? What are you basing your definition of success on? Is it Gary Vaynerchuk, and that's it's the hustle, and that's how long you need to work? I love Gary,
Culture today is hustle.
Yeah.
You're allowing me to get to the heart of the matter. I'm also a high-level suicide counselor with Crisis Text Line, and the 75% of our callers are under the age of 25. They are extremely highly susceptible to, but everybody else's life looks much better than mine, and this is why I'm suffering from isolation, loneliness, anxiety, depression, self-harm, anorexia, and all the other derivatives, and of course suicidal ideation. And I always find myself saying on the line, nobody's life looks inside as good as it does on Instagram. And you really have to recognize that. Now let's talk about the effects on a societal level, and especially on the overachiever.
Yes.
What ends up happening when you do buy into that is you start wearing masks. From pretending that everything looks amazing on Instagram, to buying vacations that you really can't afford or shouldn't afford, to living way outside your means, to pretending that everything is okay and you got this. And actually that's an insidious lie as well, because it's invulnerability, and it really doesn't allow anybody to reach you or connect with you on a genuine level. And what they are trying to mask is shame. A horrible, horrible feeling. I am not measuring up. And actually, the shame of knowing that you're pretending. And in some cases, because we also know from lots of research that this bridges onto unethical behavior as well, the shame of being a fraud. And I don't want anybody to feel that. It is easy to unravel from by recognizing that that is the pattern, and by beginning to seek help.
Talk about that. What you just said about unethical behavior. How does it lead to that?
Well, are you a fan of the TV show American Greed by any chance?
No, I don't really watch TV. So.
Oh, well, this one was really, really good. I don't even know if it's still on, but I remember being obsessed with it because I really love moral fables. There are many studies that correlate with this, and I'm very happy to send you a link to a very recent article about it. But yes, there is an extraordinary correlation with the bridging over into unethical behavior, or the let's just, do this for tax reasons, and let's do this in the agree to terms that are really not particularly moral, not particularly conscious, because capitalism allows it in order to bridge that gap, and who cares about the consequences. And by the way, you have a lot of companies that are doing things that are completely legal right now especially in the United States, and they're still unethical and could certainly be seen as tribal, meaning they're not helpful to the individuals even who work at the organization. The linkage is easy to explain by likening it to the process that you see over and over in a TV show called American Greed, which really told the story of great American scandals, from the Bernie Madoff scandal to the Raffaello Folieri scam, the guy who was engaged to Anne Hathaway, to even small-time crooks, two little old ladies who kept hustling homeless guys for their life insurance. What they all had in common was this. The first time they just tried something new, they bent the rules just a little bit, thinking and knowing that something was not okay, got away with it. The second time, emboldened, it's a little bit bigger. By the third time, they are completely immune and they do not believe that what they're doing is wrong. And this begins to translate into unethical behavior. And the most interesting correlation for me to you about this is I use behavioral assessments, DISC, Hartman HD, Trimetrics, which are really, really the most popular battery of assessments that we use today. More than 2 million people take them a year. And the assessment format has been around since the 1920s. What percentage of criminals who are under lie detector test and or behaviorally assessed actually believe that what they've done is wrong? What do you think it is?
Very small percentage.
4%.
Wow.
4%. And it's the same thing.
How do you change something if you don't know that it's wrong, right?
That's the point I'm making about not dragging the old lady across the street. I'm also not saying that any of my clients is anywhere near criminal. They're wonderful and magnificent people. And believe me, I also vet people, I think, to the best of my ability. But it's more important to understand that it's very similar to the unself-awareness.
Yes.
But
yes.
If you look at things truthfully and you want to change, we can help you.
Well, it's interesting because I was just recently talking to someone who said, I'm doing all these things. He's a high achiever. I'm doing all these things and I'm unhappy, right? I know I'm faking it. Like I'm doing a job that I don't actually enjoy. And the first thing that came up for me was, okay, you're doing all these things right, so to speak. And, you're praying and so forth and asking for guidance and you're not getting it. So let me ask you, where are you out of integrity? Tell me what's going on. And as soon as we got there, because it's like having your back is out of alignment, there's going to be problems with that. And so what you're talking about, and we were talking about conscious capitalism, that slippery slope. I recently had Andrew Hewitt on, who launched the Game Changers, the rating system. And what he noticed is some of the greatest companies in the world, in terms of like game changers making a huge impact, the Toms of the world, if you will, and Tom shoes. And he noticed that a few years down the road, some of them would slip into traditional habits. They would slip back into the old way of doing things. And he's like, why is that, right? And so what you're talking about, I'm making that correlation and saying part of the reason why it's just that little bit off and that little bit off, and that invulnerability is what I'm hearing, is that invulnerability and that faking it, the imposter syndrome kind of kicking in there. And then it's just like a little bit for you go 1 degree off, 1 degree off, 1 degree off, and all of a sudden you're way off course and you wonder how you got there.
That's exactly how it happens. And, that's also how you end up with so many coaches who don't really have accreditation and get away with it, continue to do more things and more things. And in the end, you end up with a person who's very powerful marketer, but not really a healer, has completely detached from their purpose. And I really doubt that they're deriving the same joy from their work. This is why we do this and not the other. And integrity is the only thing that really matters here. Warren Buffett always says that if you hire people, hire for 3 things: intelligence, enthusiasm, and integrity. And then he says, if you don't have the third, forget about the first 2, they're detrimental. It's exactly the same with companies. And when you're choosing a company to work for, you should certainly look at their leadership and what they stand for and how long they've stood in it. I am a friend of Jeff Rader's, one of the founders of Warby Parker, a Tom's kind of company, who then founded Harry's, which they just sold for $1.4 billion. And I can tell you, just being his friend, that man has an unmovable spine. And If you can do that at that level, anybody can do it at any level. Never forget why you're doing this. And that's really the only thing that matters here, and who you're affecting with your decisions.
So this actually brings up a really great point. So people that are looking from the outside, looking at leaders, looking at companies that they want to work for, leaders that they might want to emulate, model after, how do you distinguish, and I know that you have assessments and different things that you do and you talk to them just like I do, right? But how do you determine and distinguish the superstar paradox in action, right, versus someone that is rock solid?
Well,
How do
there's
you,
a
yeah.
difference in the feeling. And it's kind of the same way of how can you tell the difference between perfectionism and having high standards?
Ooh, great one. Yes.
Perfectionism feels awful.
Yes.
Perfectionism feels absolutely awful. Perfectionism is if I'm really, really good and I can perfect myself, I will be immune to criticism, which means the second you falter, and you will, everybody does, sorry, unless you're dead, you will falter, you will feel wretched. High standards is really about the excitement of the creation. It's the setbacks only incite you more. It's always exciting to create. You're competing with yourself. The accomplishments of others not only don't bug you, you are thrilled for other people's success. And I tell you, anybody listening knows the difference. And that's exactly the difference between the superstar paradox and superstar. Because there are superstars who know that there are moments that are not easy in the thick of it. That's how life is. But that's a big difference from I keep winning and it feels awful. And all I do is be racked with anxiety every day.
This is so good, Keren. Oh my goodness. I could, as I said, I could listen to you and just we could jam about this like all day. This is awesome. So for our listeners, I would encourage you to go to find her TED. She has a TEDx talk, and she's got another one coming. But her first TEDx talk is about this idea of uncertainty in the world. And so if you just type in her name, Keren Eldad, and we'll make sure that's in the show notes and link is there as well, you can find that. She also has a book. So tell us about your book coming out.
The upcoming book is, right now, the working title is Stop Thinking You're a Fraud. And that's because the superstar paradox requires a little bit of explanation, but it really does dive into this. And it also gives my step-by-step method, which is really about just explaining how you get from self-awareness to the end of the journey, the regular manufacturing of happiness in your life. Because that person that you talk to, and you pointed out the integrity, was probably asking you, okay, how do I do that? Well, this book is about how to do that.
Yes. I love this. So let's actually, I don't know if you've got an example. You mentioned about your friend there that is really solid in integrity. What is an example, without using names, that we could talk about that, went from one side, like being the superstar paradox, to being the superstar?
Well, I could talk about an example that everybody knows, and it really ties in very nicely to the creation of movements, the topic that you've enjoyed speaking with Eva about and other people, and that is Mohandas Gandhi, the Mahatma. The Mahatma was a superstar lawyer from Oxford and a very, very educated man who was doing everything quote unquote right until one day, in the face of injustice in a country that was his country of origin, that he kind of ended up in, first in South Africa and later in India, he just decided to break all the barriers, to do this at the cost of his own livelihood, because he literally switches from living a very well fed life to making his own clothes and being the change he wanted to see in the world, and teaching us all that at the end of the day, change comes not from the top, never from the top. It comes from us. We are always the change we want to see. The big movements in society, the big movements that transform societies, have always been down to protests and votes and getting out there and doing things the way that you really want to do them. And it just takes time and courage. That's pretty much it.
Well, you just blended, like, so from the Movement Maker series to the Conscious Capitalism series, it was perfect timing for us to have this conversation, that you could create that connection between both of those. And I love that story of Gandhi. I watched that movie on him, and just seeing that transition And we see that in society as people that are successful that finally get to that point where they say, what am I doing? And they stop, they pivot, and there is like their countenance changes. And it's just absolutely fascinating. So what is next for you? I mean, obviously you want to get this message out there further. What is the vision with this?
I'm getting married in March. That's literally the only thing I care about right now. So I'm getting married in 2 months.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm very, very happy, and I'm excited. I think that you reach a point, the superstar, the real superstar, let's say, reaches a point where it doesn't really matter. The achievements are goalposts, and goalposts will fly by. The only thing that matters to me is ease, feeling ease through the process, and expansion, always doing something else that has my attention. That's pretty much it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Keren. I appreciate you being here. And I thank you, our listeners, for being here. And I am sure that you got some insight, maybe some light bulbs are going off, hopefully, that you're like, oh, I think I might be falling into that trap. Or maybe you are well entrenched in that trap and you're like, I need to make a change on this. Well, I would encourage you to go to KerenEldad.com. That's KerenEldad.com. We'll make sure it's in the show notes, but for those of you that are listening, of course, and check out what she's doing. When does your book come out, by the way, Keren?
Probably next year.
In 2021? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you can get on her list to make sure to get some updates on that. So when it does come out, because she's taking time with this book, this isn't one of those write a book in 10 hours. She's putting the work in, the research. And so it's going to be super, super valuable for you. And so I encourage you to get a copy of that, pre-order your copy. And I'm a big believer in leaders of transformation take action. You know, action isn't just action for the sake of action. I'm talking about taking action. If you learn something, if you gain an awareness about something and there's that aha, do something with that. Take an action with it, whether it is, maybe it's journaling. It could be journaling. Maybe it could be sitting quiet, stopping in that busyness of your day right now, wherever you are listening to this podcast, and stop for a moment and check in to see, where am I? Where am I at in my life? Where am I at in my business? Where am I at in my level of happiness? Am I on this rat race, this treadmill? You know, if you are, well, for heaven's sakes, stop and check in where you are, and then get directions, get a guide, right? That's where coaches come in. You know, hire a guide that can help you to navigate to a different outcome. So I encourage you to take action on that. And we'd love to hear your story. So you can go on leadersoftransformation.com. You can reach us through the contact page. Of course, you can find us on social media. We have a great page, which is a lot of fun, on Facebook, where we share stories. We're always constantly sharing stories of good things that are happening in the world. So there's good news, people that are doing good things in the world. And so we'd love to have you follow us, but also share what you're doing to make a difference in the world. And if you have questions and comments, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much, Keren. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.